Today, data, privacy, and freedom. Where do we draw the line?
Then Zillo and AirBnB. Is America on the move?
And Eli Pariser, years after seeing a world of filter bubbles, can he build a better way?
I'm Alexa Scordato, and this is Future Forward.
I am Stephen Rosenbaum. Let us launch. Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Steve.
You know, it's funny. I was thinking this morning that we would do a show without any politics in it, but of course, and there isn't any direct politics in it. So fear not, faithful listeners and viewers. You need not scamper away. But everything is wrapped up in politics. You know, the Zillow. Well, I mean, I don't know. Let's begin with this story about Intel and NVIDIA, because you found it, and I confess to not entirely understanding it. So explain it to me.
Sure. I mean, we were talking about trends that shape the world, like that list that was put together last week. And, you know, this is a good example of computing power, Intel and NVIDIA, these chips that are actually allowing the Chinese government to basically monitor minority groups in China. And so it's a good example of really impressive technology, and then the application of it being unethical, controversial, like politically infused. I just thought it was thematically in line with a lot of the things that we've been talking about the last few episodes.
So what do you, so if you've got technology, you know, I'll tell a story. A million gazillion years ago, I was teaching or guest teaching a course at Columbia, and we brought in a bunch of engineers from Sony, and they showed a very early handheld video camera, one of the first high-8 handheld video cameras. And they talked about the technology and asked students some questions. And then I said to one of the engineers, this was when he was on stage, what do you imagine this camera will be used for? And he said, without any guile, just in a very, Japanese way, he said, well, we have no idea. That's what you're here for. So they built this technology, but without any outcome, without it wasn't to solve a problem or, democratize media or create, consumer level porn. I mean, it did all of those things, as it turned out, but they not only did they not have like a sketch of what it might do, they kind of didn't care. And so as I was reading this, I was thinking back to that, which is, we built this technology. It's really powerful. We're going to set it out in the world. Different governments and different consumer groups and different users will use it in different ways. And then it'll be up to us to kind of manage what's appropriate or put it back in the box. Is that like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's possible the US government is using the same chips to build supercomputers as well. It's just that in China, the amount of surveillance and sort of oppression that can then be enacted is, on a different scale. But, bringing it home, say, to the US, it's like, how would you feel if there are cameras in Union Square and Central Park, like basically everywhere? And now there's this supercomputer that if I wanted to go and say, I need to trace your family's every move, like, it's really easy to do that.
Well, I mean, I seem to be finding myself going back to talking about Minority Report a lot lately, but I mean, doesn't it make sense that, if the police department can say, we have a picture of this criminal committing this crime, we'd like to know where this criminal is now, type into database, find, find this image in our live database of feeds. Oh, he's, on the Upper West Side getting a coffee. Let's go arrest him there. Or better yet, let's just shut off all of his credit cards and then he'll come to us.
For criminals, sure, that sounds great. Then you move into a slippery slope of like, what about if the government could surveil Black Lives Matter protesters or people in Georgia who are advocating for the Senate race down there, and then actually prevent people from organizing and gathering.
All right, so let's flip this to the second link that you sent, which is the CEO of the IT consultancy that's providing DDoS protection for Daily Stormer. And this was a tweet that you sent me to from Ellen K. Powell. Where is the line between protection of digital freedom and protection of, dangerous public speaking? Like, what is?
Yeah,
that's really the question you're asking, right? Is which is which?
Totally. So, you look, the technology itself is not inherently bad. If anything, it's impressive, but it's the usage of that and sort of the lack of accountability that I think is missing. And what I've concluded, as with so many other technologists now in the industry, is it feels like tech can no longer remain apolitical. So we talk a lot about Facebook and Google and sort of misinformation and Twitter. I'm just saying that I brought up these two links because I think it illustrates that it's not just social platforms, right? In the case of NVIDIA and Intel, it's hardware chips. In the case of this link here, it's about a service that's actually hosting sort of a white supremacist website, right? And so I think, the headline here is, what side of history are you going to be on? If you work in the tech industry, if you're a creator, if you are an entrepreneur, like, can we afford to stay neutral?
So a gabillion years ago, when we were first working together, I don't know if you remember this, because I'm not sure it was exactly overlapping with your time, but Magnify, which it was an open source video sharing platform and let anyone build their own channels, had a KKK site built on the platform. And we had all kinds of discussions about it and meetings about what to do and could we take it down and would that change our philosophy of an open web. And instead, what we did at the time, we owned the advertising on the page, they owned the branding on the page, and so we filled the ads with ACLU ads, and they took it down and went away. They kind of scuttled away. But I'm not sure that, that was our little baby step solution back when the web was a different place. I guess
you were like ahead of the curve, though, right? And as to sort of round out this section, like, I pulled this article too from about WordPress banning the site The Conservative Treehouse, and it's an extension of what you did at Magnify, Steve, right? WordPress.com signaling that there are rules of engagement if you want to use their service, right? This is an example of a platform choosing to actually draw the line somewhere.
So, my fantasy world of the future says that, on January 20th, someone will push a magic button and all these problems will go away. But in real life, of course, they become in some ways more extreme, more complicated, more serious. And I think that I find myself in the last, I think I may have said this last time, maybe I didn't, but in the last 3 weeks, I have signed up for Gab and TikTok, and not to compare the politics of those two sites, my bad, but and Parler. So Gab and Parler in particular, because because I do feel like some of the mainstream platforms that I participate in have filtered out those voices, but I don't think those voices have gone away, and I don't know what I gain as a well-rounded person by not hearing them.
Yeah.
I watch Fox News too, but I think this battle between technology and freedom and free speech is likely to get much more complex really quickly. And while I'm glad that
Absolutely.
WordPress, I don't know anything about Conservative Treehouse, by the way. So to be fair, I mean, I don't know what they would have done to raise the ire of WordPress.com. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I read all kinds of horrific stuff all the time on all kinds of channels.
And
So,
it's important to make the distinction here. This is WordPress.com. So it's like the premium hosted version of WordPress. It is not like the open source version of WordPress.
right. So you could still download WordPress onto your server and move Conservative Treehouse over there.
Yep.
So, I mean, I can imagine a world where you or I might say, hey, we have a server and we have a WordPress instance. I'd rather have Conservative Treehouse running and be able to have a conversation with them. Like, would I volunteer to host them? Yeah, I think the answer probably is no, not today, but maybe 10 years ago I would have.
We should come back to that at the end when we talk about the recreation of digital public spaces through the lens of the civic project.
All right, so let's go next to real estate and housing. So you know, COVID arrived in February, March of this year, and everything shut down. Nothing was buying, nothing was selling, and then something kind of surprising changed. Like if you said to me objectively, would this be the year that Airbnb would file and go public? I would have said, no fucking way. I mean, seriously. I mean, so we'll get to Zillow in a minute, but let's start with Airbnb. Do you get that? Do you understand how have they turned the business around?
They haven't turned it around, but I think they have done something incredible, which is build a global brand independent of the pandemic, right? Like the S1 filing. A lot of people were basically saying the most impressive thing in the S1 filing is that 91% of Airbnb's traffic in the last 9 months is from organic and unpaid channels. So it is, as a marketer, I can tell you, it is rare. I can't think of another company that is not hyper dependent on Google PPC, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, etc. Like a global brand that literally spends almost nothing on customer acquisition is really, really impressive. And that's not going to go away.
But just to be clear, what you mean is there's enormous demand for, I need to move my family out of the city or from this quote hotspot to this safe place. And so I'm going to type into a search engine, Airbnb house for a family of 4 in Vermont. I don't need an ad to tell me that. So
yeah, or you're not even going to go to booking.com or Kayak or Hotel Tonight. Like you're going to go directly to Airbnb because they've shifted the market. As a longtime traveler, Airbnb is my preferred long-term stay provider.
All right, so let's go into our secret backdoor Facebook conference room. How many people are on the team building an Airbnb competitor on the Facebook platform right now?
I think they have their hands full with shopping e-commerce marketplace.
I totally disagree. I think they've got I think I have 75 people on a little skunk works building we've got the community, we know neighborhoods, we have all the members. Why aren't we in the house rental business? I don't know. I don't think
it wouldn't surprise me because Mark Zuckerberg is greedy. He wants his hands in everything, but I don't think they could execute it.
All right, so
they're fighting pressure from the government right now and sort of unprecedented like legislation, and their product across WhatsApp, Instagram, and core Facebook. I don't think they have a good strategy in terms of navigating the roadmap.
All right,
so I see a move to commerce. Instagram is a different story. We'll get to that in a different week.
All right, so let's get to. I call it Zillow, but you call it Zillow, and Zillow's probably right, right? I mean, I just so like
I think
how
that's
did
what they say in the commercials.
um Zillow surfing is an escape we all need right now. Do you Zillow surf? You do,
I
yeah.
do. I also Street Easy surf, but Street Easy is owned by Zillow. So I Street Easy, I Zillow, and I Airbnb surf. It's like, again, my wanderlust is so off the charts, and I lean on these three apps probably, I don't know, it's 80% of my screen usage.
All right, so we should explain that that Alexa is currently residing in a place that has lots of Trump lawn signs still up. So, you know,
And it's getting cold. It's getting cold. I
it's getting
literally
cold.
have lists right now of like warm places to stay.
So for those of us who are not as deeply into this as you are, what is Zillow searching? How does it work? Zillow surfing. How does it work? Why is it an escape?
Honestly, it's like whether you are in New York or whether you are in rural Pennsylvania, you're just browsing places that you can buy, rent, and it it sort of just gives you a temporary high, I guess. Like it gives you a glimpse into what is possible. And I found myself doing it. And so I was pleasantly surprised to see Taylor Lorenz of the New York Times write a whole article about this and to know that I'm not the only weirdo who does it.
So it's not. So is it the equivalent of when people in New York on Sunday morning just pick the newspaper up, the digital newspaper such as it is, and pick a couple of open houses and go and look at people's home, like
That on steroids. And there are probably different segments. Like there are people who are like passively looking and they're just daydreaming. And there's some people who are actually thinking, I've been living in my Brooklyn 500 square foot apartment for the last 4 years. Wouldn't that cabin in the Catskills in the Hudson Valley be a nice escape? Like maybe now's the time. And we're seeing that like the real estate market is more competitive than ever. I was reading an article that said like the real estate market in Montclair, New Jersey is a bloodbath. It's hyper competitive.
um, I'm going to pull up an opinion piece that was in the Times about local business because I think I don't know where it is. Yeah, I'll find it later. I, I I think that as New York battens down for what's going to be the next X months, 3, 5, 7, not 1 or 2, it's easy to forget what you love about New York when, but at the end of the day, there was an op-ed in the New York Times, I guess yesterday, basically saying the thing that we love about New York is the bodegas. It's the local shoe repair store. It's all the mom and pop community businesses up and down the street. And if we let them fail, they will not return. Like mom and pop aren't going to fold up their tent, close their shoe repair store, and then come back in 6 months when the economy's better. Like there's no. So I think that for some of the people that are moving out of the city because the city is a little bit desolate right now, it's worth remembering. And was not saying this to you specifically, but it's like the return journey back is for lots of people is harder. Particularly, family, kids, mortgage, whatever. I have a dear friend, longtime friend, who moved his entire family to Vermont, and I'd like to think that he'll pick up and come back as soon as he's able and the city is back to some normalcy. But in real life, he might be stuck in Vermont.
And what's crazy is that speaking for my town specifically, I have met more transplants from Philadelphia and New York in the last couple of weeks, and they're all opening cool coffee shops, restaurants, and partaking in like this outdoor makers fair. And I went to a vegan taco stand, Steve. A vegan taco stand across the street from a bar with a huge Trump sign that said ban China. Like, and when you look at that trend, it makes it harder for me to rush back to the city.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I think you ought to do, and I mean this quite
What?
seriously. I think you ought to put up, GoFundMe, or some kind of a funding source. You take a picture of that bar, put it up, and say, "I want to buy this."
Yeah.
How much money do you need to buy that bar? And then take
Right.
the fucking sign down. Because I guarantee you, I mean, do you think it's 50 grand or 100 grand to buy that bar?
Probably, yeah. Something like that.
I honestly, overnight, I can have that money for you.
Oh my gosh.
Just like all the urban money we're moving to the country, but you know what? But that bar bothers me. And you just go to the owner and say, "Listen, you've done great. You've been here a long time." You could do two things. You could say, "How much do I have to pay you to take that sign down?"
Yep.
$5,000. We could raise that in 30 seconds. Or, "I'd like to buy your bar and run it." So,
Yeah.
all right. So now let's move on to the last chapter of today's episode, which is this interesting conversation. Well, I mean, before we get past Airbnb, should we talk about the company shares and people missing out on the company shares? Because I didn't understand that either.
I think that there are just two things of note, like, thematically, right? They lost an executive because he was concerned about sharing data with China, right? So again, data, China, can you stay neutral? In this case, an Airbnb exec pieced out. And then the second thing is that, we talked about, was it Prop 22?
Yep, a lot. We've talked about Prop 22 a lot.
And Airbnb is basically saying, Brian Chesky, to his credit, is saying there's a different way. There's a different way to recognize sort of gig workers. Or, I mean, Airbnb hosts are a little bit different than I think Uber drivers, but still, it's the same class. They're providing sort of the meat and potatoes for the service. And Brian Chesky is basically saying, we're going to offer hosts a slice of the pie. So there's a class of Airbnb hosts who will get Airbnb stock, which is really cool. Yeah. I mean, it's an imperfect system because it excludes a large number of hosts, but directionally, it's a pretty big signal that acknowledges that they wouldn't be where they are without hosts. Whereas I think if you look at DoorDash and Uber, they're more like, you guys are all interchangeable and like whatever. Like, we're going to continue to just see you. We're going to continue to classify you as not part of the company.
So let's move on to this Eli conversation, because this was the one that, and it was puzzling and interesting. So let's start with a little bit of history. So,
yep.
So Eli Pariser wrote what was a prescient book called The Filter Bubble, which, the problem with predicting the future and doing it as well as it turns out he did is, you wake up every morning knowing it's a little like standing on the curb and seeing these two cars driving toward each other and go, they're going to hit. If somebody doesn't get out of the way of the other car, they're going to, oh, wow, they're really, and then watching the car wreck. And you're like, should I have screamed louder? Should I have waved my hands? And like the thing that he saw in the filter bubble and that he predicted, which was that people would have kind of individual realities, turned out to be, the creator of where we are today.
Yep.
So now he's trying to rethink whether or not there's a way to build a different kind of social network. And what's interesting is if you Google him, like there's little sprinkles of what he's working on in a bunch of places on the web, and I'll show them to you. But there's not like, it doesn't land with a thump. It's not like you Google Eli Pariser and it's like, boom, there's the article that explains it. So, so that's like, he might be being out yelled with a thoughtful response to a complicated problem. I don't know.
I think my take on it is more that the next wave of digital spaces that he's talking about, it, it's not new or novel in the sense that it's social networks are now decade plus years old. Um, it's just like it's less sexy, less controversial, more normal, more stable, more healthy, more safe. I don't think the news cycle really lends itself to that kind of narrative, at least not right now.
So the thing he's building, the is called New Public, and the site that I found all of the kind of granular detail about what he's working on is Civic Signals, and there's a Substack subscription which I signed up for. But it's, to your point, like, it's dense. It's not. It's
Mm-hmm.
not 140 characters. It's not frothy. It's complicated and thoughtful, and good for him for writing it. But at the same time, so the best thing I can suggest is just following them on Twitter if you want to kind of get a drumbeat of of the digital, better digital spaces conversation that he's trying to. So here, I'll read you. New Public. Welcome to New Public, a home for people who are building and dreaming up a diverse, community-serving, anti-oppressive public. Sorry. Where'd it go? Public Spaces. It's a newsletter, magazine, and community rep together, supported by the team at Civic Signals. So,
yeah, it feels very workshoppy right now, right? Like they don't have a central thesis, plan, like roadmap that feels tangible right now, but it's an important idea regardless. Like I for years now, I've been saying I wish Mark Zuckerberg hired the brightest minds from, public health, from urban planning, from policymakers to actually fix the technology. Like he doesn't need more coders and developers. He needs more people who are attracted to a project like this.
I mean, not to defend Zuckerberg, but one could argue, if you go back to his Harvard commencement speech, which is now 3 years ago, that he really saw, groups as I think he thought that he could tame the horrible public conversation by building these safe space vertical, invitation only groups, of which I am a member of a number, and some of them are quite civil.
But like that's a good example though, Steve, of like at what point in the product development process did his teams, Zuckerberg's teams, actually bring in, I don't know, professional mediators, guidance counselors, like people who are actually skilled, or psychologists skilled at understanding like human endeavor? Or was it really just a race to ship a product that would drive more engagement because you were at risk of potentially not logging into Facebook every 5 seconds with the news feed and general platform? Like my guess is every product decision, whether it's groups, the Instagram acquisition, was all in service of one metric, which was engagement, and in return, like shareholder value, right? Like ads. So I think that's also why this civic project is like not sexy, because there's not like, it's not about the business, and it potentially isn't viral, and it potentially isn't very sticky. It's just thoughtful.
So, not to end on a down note, but I was making a list the other day of all of the well-intentioned, good-hearted startup ideas that I've heard of in the last 2 years that have come and gone. Because the cycle works like this. I have an idea. I'm going to build a MVP, and I build it in a weekend or with a couple of developers. It takes me a week or two, and it's pretty cool. And then I go and I show it to some seed stage people, and I get a little bit of money and and now it's a little thing. And now I got to go out and raise capital. And the capital markets say, A, is it a big enough idea? Is it going to be $1 billion idea? And B, is the CEO, founder, team actually secretly, but not that secretly, really motivated by making a shit ton of money for themselves and therefore for us? And, so for example, I haven't spoken to Stuart about this, but like I look at Slack and the decision to sell to Salesforce, and part of me thinks, did Stuart wake up in the morning going, boy, when we get big enough and when we're part of the fabric of enough companies and enough teams, what I really do is want to cash out. Like secretly, I just really need, it'll be my third exit because I've already made a ton of money on the first two, Flickr and then the gaming one, I don't remember. But like net, like, no, I don't think so. I don't think founders who are driven by building new, unique community. So the question is, like, what, I don't know this as an insider. But like, I know this, someone out there who was an investor in Slack and who was patient capital, right? They waited a long time, said, hey, Stuart, time for me to get my money back at a 10x return, please. Because that's what my LPs expect of me. So as long as you're building startups on that quicksand, then how can you blame Mark Zuckerberg or anybody else for being about building things that make a lot of money for a lot of people that want to make a lot of money? Because that's
Right.
that's the coin of the realm. Like,
Yeah.
So how do we fix that, listeners,
There are
viewers?
funds emerging, like the founder and interesting operators, like founder of Gumroad, CEO of Buffer, that are trying to basically be like non-chaos companies. Like they're not taking VC money for that through the lens of like 10x growth. It's almost like lifestyle digital businesses that can still be big and can still create jobs and can still provide the market great services. But it doesn't have to be that swinging for the fences moonshot.
All right. Well, that takes us to a whole new place, which we should think about maybe as a year-end conversation. With that, we are out of time. Have a lovely week. Stay warm. Should we send you blankets? Should we put up your Twitter handle? And
5 degrees colder here. I'll survive.
All right. See you next week.